Welcome back to another episode of the Links Golf Podcast. I'm Al Lunsford, digital editor for Links, joined by Joe Passoff. Joe, what's going on today?
Hey, calm and bright. A little golf coming in Toronto, and we're all getting excited about next week's U.S. Open.
Yes, we are. That's going to be the topic today is a U.S. Open themed podcast. First, this season, we are sponsored by our friends at Perry Golf. Since 1984, Perry Golf has been the gold standard in luxury golf travel. Joe, as you know, they're not just tour operators, they're your partners in accessing golf's most exclusive experiences, including the open and guaranteed tee times at the Old Course at St. Andrews. With thoughtfully designed itineraries spanning more than 40 countries and 6 continents, choose from their intimate small group tours, elegant golf cruises, or fully customized tours for your private group. Their experienced hosts ensure every moment unfolds seamlessly, from teeing off at legendary courses to discovering local cultures and staying at exceptional hotels. Are you ready for extraordinary golf adventures? Let Perry Golf show you how far the game can take you. Visit perrygolf.com and play the game, see the world. Thanks to our friends at Perry Golf.
Indeed, as I've mentioned before, Perry Golf helped show me the world of golf and reveal so many of the world's greatest courses, especially Scotland, Ireland, England, Wales, China, even one time a long time ago. So I know we're going to talk about some great golf courses and some great tournaments today, but it is fun for me to reminisce about happy times with Perry Golf.
I did confirm I played golf with a guy from Perry Golf this past week, and Harrison Gold is his name, and he confirmed that Antarctica is not one of the 6 continents they go to. So you're not going to be playing any ice golf with them, but we go to the other 6, so that's fantastic. Joe, I'm going to lead off today with a U.S. Open themed question for you. What is the last U.S. Open that you attended?
Well, I have missed the last couple. Just watched them like most of us on television, but I was there for one I'm going to talk about today in 2022 at Brookline, and what a tournament that was.
Mm-hmm. Maddie Fitz. I my last one was last year. Pinehurst. Got to go on Thursday with my wife. It was wonderful. Great experience, and obviously a great tournament result. That one's going to get brought up again as well today. The topic, of course, if you didn't already know by reading the title of the episode, we're covering somewhat ranking the U.S. Opens of the 21st century. So we're going back to the period starting with 2001. Again, me and Joe discussed this, that it's 2001, not 2000, where you have that qualifier for the century mark. And we're going to cover our favorite U.S. Open in that span, a pick for each of us, least favorite, and then what we're calling the most bizarre. So, whatever the circumstances may be that led to our pick, for whatever reason, the strangest, wackiest, weirdest, most bizarre U.S. Open that we recall in that span. Um, let's take it from the top with some good vibes and talk about our favorites. Um, who's first, Joe?
Al, I'm going to let you lead because I
Oh,
know what you're leading with, and because I agree with you 1,000%.
yeah, and this goes back to an article that you produced for us and have produced a couple of these over the years, and best, greatest U.S. Open moments of all time of a certain particular era, and it stands there at the top of both lists and will be the same for many people, and that's Tiger Woods' victory in 2008 at Torrey Pines. That's my favorite. That just may sweep the board, Joe, and be everyone's favorite U.S. Open because of what it gave us. And today, I feel like a lot of the reason that Tiger Woods is this superhuman, maybe not human type, has this aura about him, stems a lot from this one tournament. I mean, obviously he has the tournament, the resume of wins and second all time in majors. But this being a major tournament, the way he won it, the way the tournament itself ended, and the results of that, and what we all learned later, we knew that Tiger was coming off some surgery on his left knee, but we did not know the extent of the injuries that he was dealing with during the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, and essentially he's playing on a broken leg, Joe, and wins in 91 holes is what it eventually takes him to win. Initial comments from you before I get further into what happened there.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we know from years of covering Tiger, he's not big on revealing all of the details as far as what was going on with him physically, um, and understandably so. But it also would have given his opponents some extra uh, oomph to say, we're dealing with somebody that is really struggling right now. So he had his game face, his poker face on, and yeah, for a variety of reasons. I mean, Al, I'll let you get into the specifics, but it is my favorite U.S. Open. And when I think of other favorites, the greatest over the years, including last century, Tom Watson's chip in at Pebble Beach at the 71st hole, or Jack Nicklaus dueling with Ben Hogan and Arnie in 1960 at Cherry Hills. For several reasons, uh, this one in 2008 comes out as a favorite for me. And that is also something we forget, that Torrey Pines South has taken its share of online criticism, in that one, it's a regular tour stop every year. And so it wasn't, quote, special enough. And yet it allowed for, yielded, and produced a truly special U.S. Open. In fact, several of them. But, that would be the backdrop for what happened with Tiger in '08.
Yeah, I was just gonna say is sort of the recent example was we see the same thing happening at Quail Hollow in terms of the conversation of a venue that gets played every year on the PGA Tour. So the familiarity is there, and it doesn't feel maybe like a typical U.S. Open at a place that you don't see every maybe once a decade even. So um, you have all that going on, but there's so many of these iconic Tiger moments. As I was looking back um, throughout the coverage of the tournament, um, the Dan Hicks's iconic "expect anything different" when Tiger drills the putt to get into the playoff. I'd forgotten that that's where that came from. Tiger chipping in and kind of sheepishly grinning and holding his hat when he's in the blue with the black vest. That all of these moments are packed into the lore of Tiger Woods and images we've seen throughout the years and stemming from one place. Um, so the scene is set, and Joe Rocco Mediate is uh, I don't know what his odds were going into that week. He's 45 years old. If he would have won this tournament, he would have been the oldest to win the U.S. Open in history, besting Hale Irwin by a few months, who won at 45 in 1990 at Medina. So by the time you're getting to Sunday, and this is a possibility, like that has to be a major, major storyline. On top of that, you have Lee Westwood in contention. He was always perennially the best to not have won a major. It seemed. I think he was world number one at some point in that stretch too, and still never crossed the finish line. But he had a putt on the 18th hole to get into that playoff as well, and didn't end up making that. Um, Tiger sets it up, came to the final hole needing a 12 footer to tie Rocco Media and go into an 18-hole playoff. Yeah, that's another thing about this event is that we don't see the 18-hole playoff anymore. And what's so great about that is you have a whole day of golf just mano a mano between those two guys. Now the U.S. Open is a two-hole aggregate playoff. I'll go through the other ones quickly. In case anyone was curious, Masters is sudden death. That changed from an 18-hole playoff in 1976. The PGA Championship a year later changed theirs as well and was no longer 18 holes. The PGA Championship is now a 3-hole aggregate stroke play playoff, and the Open Championship is a 4-hole stroke play playoff. So, after which, in every one of those cases, you're going into sudden death. Except for the U.S. Open now, you get 2 holes, and if they're still tied, they do another 2 holes. No, excuse me. I read that wrong. 2 holes, sudden death. So that's another wrinkle of this. It actually ends up going to an additional 3 holes right on top of that. Or this was the 91st hole, so that would have been 1 additional hole, which Rocco bogeys and Tiger gets his 3rd U.S. Open, 14th major. After Oh, and one more thing about that playoff on Monday, Rocco Mediate also wearing red. I mean, what a big deal that was to go face up against Tiger and put on the same red that he was going to wear. After the round, Rocco Mediate said, "I never quit. I've been beaten down a few times and I came back and I got what I wanted. I got a chance to beat the best player in the world. I came up just a touch short, but I think I had him a little scared at once, which is great. He just said, 'Great fight' to me, and that means the world to me." Woods' quote after he was done was, "I'm glad I'm done. I'm done. All I can say is the atmosphere kept me going. The tournament being a major championship here at Torrey Pines, all the people, I could never quit in front of these people. It wasn't going to happen." Um, all of that culminating in what I think is the best U.S. Open, certainly of the 21st century, but maybe of all time.
Yep, we can argue about more than a century of U.S. Opens. I mean, engaging greatness, in a U.S. Open, and not just our personal favorites, but excuse me, um, that I did a little formula of my own a couple years back where you wanted close, exciting contest for the most part, lasting history and memories. This could include record-breaking performances too, a popular champion, and an uplifting climax. So you had everything working in this one. Again, it's easy to forget because of that incredible 12-foot birdie putt at the 72nd hole that got him into the playoff. That Tiger was doing Tiger things on Saturday at a level maybe only Tiger can do. In a 6-hole stretch, he had 2 eagles and a chip in birdie. Like, that's the stuff where you like leap off the sofa and like, holy cow, I can't believe he just did this. Oh, but it's Tiger Woods. Yeah, of course we believe it. And that was what was so compelling. Final round duel ultimately, and Rocco did have him, is Rocco. Right, 45-year-old, very popular player, although kind of a journeyman in a way. Only had a few PGA Tour wins, was enjoying a little bit of a career renaissance at that point. But once again, nobody you would have thought would have gone toe to toe with Tiger, and he did. And that's what made this tournament elevated even to the top rung, is you had somebody like that, kind of like a Bob May at Valhalla in 2000 for the PGA. So all of those elements added up, the ingredients for the perfect stew. There you go. Your favorite U.S. Open of the 21st century, my favorite U.S. Open, or maybe the best one of all time, and that was Torrey Pines.
Yeah, and it was, U.S. Open scoring, by the way, the score to get into that playoff was 1 under for the week. And Tiger, you talked about him doing Tiger things. He also was doing a lot of un-Tiger like things in double bogeying the first hole 3 out of the 4 days of the tournament. So really, like, he probably should have run away with it had it not been for the slow starts 3 of the 4 days, including the final day.
Well, there you go. Incredible golf tournament, and shoot, Al, we've got a few others to get through, but that's kind of cream rose to the top, best, favorite, all of it.
And pretty remarkable that they were still square after 18 holes in the playoff too. I mean, what were the odds of that? All right. Well, we covered that one, extensively. So that I stole that pick from you. Did you have another one, or another couple as your favorites?
Yeah, and I was happy to give that one. I mean, after that, I have two favorites of the 21st century. They're almost neck and neck, and the first one would be the one we alluded to closer to the top of the show, which was 2022 U.S. Open at the Country Club at Brookline. Um, I'm a huge history buff, so it's very cool to me when our national championship is taken back to some of these golf courses that factored in the first part of the 20th century. And certainly few more historic golf courses exist, at least the club that hosted it as the Country Club. So folks are pretty familiar with Francis Ouimet turning back the two great British professionals at the time, Harry Vardon, Ted Ray. Um, that was 1913, immortalized in Mark Frost's book. Uh, and then you had uh, a number of other U.S. Opens that took place there. 1963, three-way playoff. 1988, Curtis Strange and Nick Faldo, two of the giants of the game going at it. Uh, and that kind of thing. Great Ryder Cup there in 99. So incredible history at the Country Club. I wondered at the start, in this day and age, how does a golf course that barely measures 7,000 yards going to hold up for these guys? Unless you really trick it up. Now, they were able to, with a new configuration and some Gil Hanse work, stretch it to 74, 72, 64, par 70. Okay, so there was enough length in and of itself, but you still wondered. And sure enough, the weather delivered. It was a combination of a beautiful first day, rain that didn't emerge, warm second day, and then Saturday, Sunday turned cool, windy. And I mean, it was windy enough to where it really affected things. And sweaters, in the middle of June, and it felt very old timey. And and so with what unfolded, it was fantastic entertainment. So Matt Fitzpatrick, Matthew as he was known, I think right up until the tournament. Then he said he preferred Matt. Um, had an interesting factoid in his background. He had won the U.S. Amateur in 2013,
That's
nine
right.
years before, at the Country Club. And so, in one sense, he was defending champ in the biggest tournament they had. Well, there were all kinds of amazing things going on at this one, including the actual defending champ, Jon Rahm, in the hunt. Uh, you had the final four pairings were Fitzpatrick and Will Zalatoris, the guy who played so incredibly well in every major and had just finished second at the PGA the month before. You had local favorite Keegan Bradley, the big New England star that, he was from Vermont and had all the local folks after him. Keegan Bradley paired with Jon Rahm, defending champ and world number two. The third group to go off, top ranked Scotty Scheffler, the Masters champion, who had already won four times, and a fine Canadian named Adam Hadwin. And then fourth up, Rory McIlroy, ranked eighth in the world, but a favorite in any major he entered, and Sam Burns, ranked ninth in the world. These were the best players in the world playing the best on this golf course that had so much history. And the way it unfolded down the stretch was, again, magical if you were a fan, because there were, let me check my notes here. a whole bunch of lead changes. Right through the final 6, 7 holes, and it looked like Zalatoris actually was going to get it done for a while. I'm looking at how it unfolded, and then you had a couple of incredible shots from Matt Fitzpatrick, sinking a huge par putt, a birdie putt at 15, which was just gigantic. Then right after him, paired together, Zalatoris sticks it to 6 feet at the par 3 16th and birdies. And Zalatoris had makeable birdie putts at 17 and 18. Fitzpatrick drives it into a fairway bunker at the last and hits this incredible 6 iron. Yes, we're hitting 6 irons into a par 4 and put it to 20 feet or so and a beautiful 2 putt. And Zalatoris was not able to convert his birdie putt. So you had big names on a historic stage with a really exciting finish full of wow kinds of golf shots. So that's what 2022 meant to me. And I was there. And anyway, that remains up there as a personal favorite.
Yeah, before DeChambeau did it at Pinehurst, this was the fairway shot from the bunker to win the U.S. Open that everyone was talking about. And I don't know if they have a plaque there at Brookline for Matt Fitzpatrick, but they should because they just put one at Pinehurst for Bryson. Um, as you mentioned, going into that final round, all those guys you mentioned were within 3 shots of each other. So you just had this sort of anticipation going into the final day that this was going to be a classic. Turned out that way. I read that at one point during the final round, Scotty actually took the lead. And, this is 2022. So if we're talking about that happening this year, you sort of expect now Scotty to run away with that. So maybe predating his dominance a little bit, but he was right there in the hunt. Bunch of guys close, and that factoid about Matt Fitzpatrick having won in the U.S. Open, or U.S. Amateur there at Brookline. I think a lot of people were like, "That's great. Maybe I'll throw $5 on him or something." But again, not expecting him to be the one who came away with it at the end. So any way that domino falls, it would have made a good story from all those guys in the final group. And can you just imagine if Adam Hadwin was the one that came through all of that?
Hey, right. He's come close a few times.
Right.
Well, Al, I had one other that was right up there with 2022. Maybe less magical favorite for me because I wasn't there. But again, I was sitting on my sofa watching this unfold, and that would be 2021, the year before. And again, it was at Torrey Pines, which took heaps of abuse from all the social guys, all the digital guys that just it's Torrey Pines and it's not exciting enough and it's this and it's that. And I'm like, I don't know, produced a heck of a tournament in 2008. Say what you will about its architecture or its lineage, its history, but man, it produced a great champion. And in 2021, here's how it unfolded again. You had fog in the first round that caused delays. Okay, a little weather, a little weird Southern California coastal weather, which is sort of fun, even if it's a little aggravating. But then what you had in 2021 was everything that you'd want in a US Open. The quote unknowns that the mainstream media suffer with. Richard Bland and Russell Henley leading for much of the way. The defending champion, Bryson DeChambeau, entering the fray on the final day, only to suffer a major meltdown on the back nine, 2 bogeys, a double, and a quad. I mean, that is a meltdown. But you had a scenic, challenging course where folks in the East Coast got to see it during their prime time, and it proved a great test again. So in the end, you had Jon Rahm, who was only 26, but a top three player who had yet to win a major, dueling with Louis Oosthuizen, who had the tournament in his grasp and then didn't. In a jump off your sofa conclusion, Rahm drained two hard-breaking birdie putts on 17 and 18, and Louis tugged two heartbreaking drives on the same holes, both of which handed the U.S. Open to Rahm. So that one ranks right up there. I mean, Rahm didn't just make one great birdie putt, he made two, 17 and 18. That gave him his first major, the 21 U.S. Open at Torrey Pines.
Yeah, that was Blandy right there in the mix for a while. I totally forgot
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
true.
Um, and again, this is 2021, Rahm's first major. Uh, when he ultimately wins the Masters in 23 after Scotty won in 22, you're kind of thinking like these are going to be the two guys. And then unfortunately, you have the split and Rahm now going to live. It just, you wish you see it in the majors now when they get back into contention with each other. You saw it at the PGA. Scotty and Rahm right there. You just wish you could see more of that. But Torrey Pines looking at Quail Hollow this year and probably thinking, been there with the conversation. Um, if anyone can relate it to Quail, it's Torrey. But yeah, this was a big moment for Jon Rahm to get his first, uh, and it turned out to be a great event. So that's a good one. My runner up was going to be Pinehurst. I think getting to go and be on the grounds and feel it, and then we went on Thursday, like I said, and then to go back and watch the rest of it at home, but understand the atmosphere and how everything was laid out, and just to get that very compelling finish, especially thinking Rory was going to get across the finish line and win a major for the first time in a long time. Uh, it was just fantastic, and kudos to Bryson DeChambeau for warding him off. But uh, excited again to get a rejuvenated Pinehurst, another look at the U.S. Open, and then to think it's going to be back there in a few years as well. So the history around it, it's all fantastic. And recency bias may be the reason why I think it's my runner up there, but it was just such a good tournament, I thought.
It was electrifying. In part, Al, it was electrifying for the wrong reason, with Rory missing the short putt or two that will, for many, associate that tournament. But maybe over time, I think folks are appreciating what an impossible bunker shot and save that Bryson DeChambeau made. And he had suffered a little bit of his own on the back nine, but recovered with that. Absolutely incredible. So that's a very good pick. Could wind up easily be number two ahead of the two I picked. But I like the fact that in what I picked, so much positive happened at the end, whereas it was a split decision in 2024.
Yeah, correct. All right, so we're going to get then to our least favorites here in a second, but we'll give you one more word from Perry Golf before we get into that. So, have you ever dreamed of teeing off where golf legends walked? Perry Golf takes you there from St. Andrews's hallowed fairways to Royal County down stunning coastline. But we don't stop at the 18th hole. Picture yourself on safari in South Africa, learning the tango in Argentina, or experiencing authentic Japanese golf culture and cuisine with sit-down lunch breaks at the turn. Always been fascinated by that. Just after you play 9 holes, let's have lunch and then we're going back out. Um, Beats a hot dog any day. But for over 40 years, Perry Golf has been crafting extraordinary golf journeys across 6 continents, combining exclusive access to the world's greatest courses with unforgettable cultural adventures. They've got small group tours, luxury golf cruises, and custom tours just for your own group. Perry Golf doesn't just plan trips, they create memories that last a lifetime. Visit perrygolf.com, that's Perry golf.com, and discover where golf can take you. All right, Joe, we talked about those U.S. Opens that we really loved for given reasons, and now we're going to transition. Let's talk about a couple that gave us either headache or just we didn't really remember fondly for some reason. And I'm going to let you go first.
Well, since I'm kind of crankier than you are, I do have a couple of
It's
choices.
growing on me. The longer I live, the more
You
cranky I
didn't get it
become.
from me, but yeah, no, I mean, we look forward to the U.S. Open every year, no matter what's going on in our lives or where the tournament's being held. It is our national championship, and all the excitement it brings. Yeah, not everyone lives up to the hype, the expectation. One that didn't for me um, was the 2011 U.S. Open at Congressional. And so, what still bothers me about it? Well, I was fortunate to cover the 1997 U.S. Open at Congressional, and it was awesome. I mean, it really was. You had great players coming down the stretch. Um, and ultimately, a couple of bad mistakes, unfortunate for some, including Tom Lehman, and Ernie Els got away with the uh, the title in 1997. But it was fun being in Washington D.C. and Congressional had a lot of history. Of course, Ken Venturi winning the 1964 U.S. Open on as he was struggling physically. But the 97 Open, unlike 64, they chose to finish on the par three hole that was actually the final hole of the golf course. In 64, they didn't finish on that hole. They finished on 17, which is a great finishing hole with the clubhouse in the background. So in 2011, they decided to go back to finishing on 17 and created an entirely new hole that became the 10th hole. Uh, well, okay, all of that, I think 10 is a better par three than 18. But what happened that week? Okay, maybe the best, most exciting young player in the game, Rory McIlroy, won his first major, and that was fantastic. We were so excited about his potential. He had shot 63 at the old course the year before during the first round of the Open Championship and all that sort of thing. But this one was a little bit more of a struggle for me because the conditions were really soft. The greens were just too soft for a US Open. Rory decimated it. I mean, he set an all-time record low 268, uh, easily breaking the old mark. 16 under, it played as a par 71 that year. Was also a US Open record. He won by eight, I think it was, a complete runaway. Now, I'm okay with utter dominance when it's so well deserved, the way Tiger did it in 2000 at Pebble. In Rory's case, yeah, he completely lapped the field, but it wasn't seemingly a worthy US Open test that year. And in the end, it just didn't do a whole lot for me other than tipping my cap to the greatest young talent at that point that we had seen since Tiger. So, congrats to Rory, but just not a favorite U.S. Open in my book.
He's just so far ahead of everyone the whole time. Wire to wire, he led by 3 after the first round, pushed that up to 6 after the second. Then it was 8, and ultimately that's what he won by. Um, Sort of interesting just looking at the boards round by round, who was right there behind him had there been some sort of collapse, Joe. For most of the tournament was Y.E. Yang, who everyone remembers stealing that PGA from Tiger at Hazeltine. So um, the the comparison there of the two of the greatest talents we've seen in the modern era, um, both being tailed by Y.E. Yang, is kind of funny. But you're right. I mean, like I couldn't really tell you much of anything. I just remember images of Rory and the Congressional Clubhouse. That's pretty much all I got for that tournament because that's all there was.
Yeah, that's all there was, and it just again salute to Rory, but it wasn't sufficiently testing to say, wow, you had really earned your stripes, so to speak, in that way. Al, I had one other that just struck me in the 21st century as utterly forgettable. Again, with a truly deserving champion, that would be 2003. And that would have been Jim Furyk winning his first and only regular tour major championship. Uh, and that was at Olympia Fields uh, in Chicago, suburban Chicago, which was a golf course not known to a whole lot of modern fans. Typically, Medina in the area would get the major championships. And before that, all those Western Opens at Butler National. So, uh, Olympia Fields, the North Course there, had some history. 28 U.S. Open and the 61 PGA, but wasn't terribly familiar. It also wasn't terribly dramatic as a golf course. I mean, tip your hat to a quality design and a restoration of sorts, but just not a lot of inherent drama that it would have, brought out big moments. In addition, again, Jim Furyk, totally deserving winner, was one of the best players on tour year after year after year, and it was great to see him get a major, but he winds up bogeying his last two holes and still wins by three over Stephen Leaney. Who? Yeah, that kind of thing. It just it doesn't make for a memorable. Oh, that was some duel. Well, no, it wasn't. You've never heard of the second guy, and the first guy was leading by five, and bogey in the finish. Just very very dull. But the last thing I'll say about why it was not a favorite in the 21st century, I'll have to claw that back a little bit for something I completely forgot about. And I will buzz through this, but I had absolutely forgotten about it until last night. The first round yielded one of the greatest memories and the greatest moments in all of US Open first round history. I had just forgotten about it until I looked at my own Word documents last night.
U.S. Open first round history.
Yep.
Okay, not
So
just U.S. Okay,
not in
first.
total, but just something that happened like when Nicklaus and Weiskopf both shot record 63s at Baltusrol in
Okay,
1980. Holy cow.
I'm with you.
Okay. First round, Tom Watson with his caddy, Bruce Edwards, shared the lead after the first round with a 65. And I wrote at the time, not only was it the feel good moment of 2003, it was one for the ages. Holding a 6-iron for Eagle on his third hole was special. Crickling in a 45-foot putt at the 16th was remarkable. That Watson did it at age 53, competing on a special exemption, was remarkable. That he accomplished it alongside Bruce Edwards, his caddy of 30 years, was unforgettable. In January of that year, doctors informed Edwards he had incurable, well, let's just call it Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. That's it. He had been given a death sentence earlier that year.
Mm.
And here he summoned the strength to walk with Watson for one more U.S. Open. And as those two old friends walked up 18, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Uh, After the interview, I'm sorry, after the round, he went to the interview room, Tom Watson did, and educated the media and the world about ALS and illuminated that the role that players can play and what it can mean to have a caddy alongside of you that means so much to you. So we turned back the clock today, said Edwards. It was a blast. He's 53 going on 24. And a year later, Bruce Edwards had lost his life, lost his fight. So anyway, very dull unmemorable conclusion, but the beginning of the 2003 US Open, man, forgot how memorable that was.
Yeah, my goodness. Apologies for making light of what you had coming there, but that's an incredible day, and wow, would have loved to have remembered that if I could. Tom Watson getting up there and talking about um, ALS and what just an awful disease. We did a charity drive for ALS in college and learned about that because we had some connections to people who had that disease through our fraternity. So I know all about how horrific that is, and for them to have that moment together in the first round of the U.S. Open is pretty special.
Yeah, it was even more special to me because my wife's family had as their dentist growing up Bruce Edwards' dad,
Oh
Dr.
wow.
J. Edwards, and my wife's family was very friendly with the Edwards family in the Wethersfield, Connecticut area. So it hit doubly home, in a way. I had known and respected Bruce Edwards. He was one of the top caddies for all those years. And then to be dealt with this, to have to deal with it in such a public way, and to have one final memory where your man at 53 is tied for the top after one round of the U.S. Open. Extra special.
Yeah. Man, if we had done this podcast about our favorite rounds by round at the US Open, that would have probably topped the list of favorite first rounds for sure.
Oh, you're absolutely right there, Al.
So for me, and I'll set the stage here. Like going back probably in basically in the decade when you started 2001 to 2009. I mean 2001 I'm 11 years old, Joe. So all of this is kind of relative and leading up to the 2010s in terms of what I really remembered or really cared about or understood at that time about what the US Open was. Obviously, it's a big deal. There's a bunch of fanfare and all these. It's hard to say that, that's my least favorite US Open because there's so much build up around it. Like it's big no matter what happens. And it's always better than, the Wells Fargo if there's a classic tournament. Like I'm still more excited about the US Open, even if it doesn't really pan out to be this sort of great event from a result standpoint. But nonetheless, I'm going to go to 2009 at the top of mine, and I know you kind of had that on your list as well, too. And that's Lucas Glover winning at Bethpage. So it always strikes me maybe around this time in the U.S. Open, but in general around the majors that Lucas Glover's won a major. It's always something that I sort of have forgotten, and maybe this is why too, because of what occurred at the 2009 U.S. Open at Bethpage, a slush fest, if you will, because there was so much rain throughout that week that the starting and stopping of it all just made it really hard to keep your attention. And it's the US Open, so of course you're going to tune in, but like, when are we going to get there? Like, all of these rounds are finishing at weird times. So let me just give you what the timeline of events was. Round one starts on Thursday, is suspended at 10:15 a.m. And that's it for the day. So you're ready to go. It's already raining when they start playing, but then at 10:15 the horn blows and they just don't make it out there at all for the rest of the day. So immediately deflated from, yes, the
Yep.
US Open starting, to, okay, now I've got nothing to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Uh, resumes on Friday with Mike Weir in the morning, finishing the round at 6 under and taking the lead on Thursday. Round two then begins at 5 p.m. on Friday and goes into the next day, finishes Saturday afternoon. And Glover shot 6 under in the second round at 64, so he's gotten himself up at the top of the leaderboard at that point. Round three then starts Saturday after round two finishes. So you've got the guys that missed the cut that have to still be there. You know, they're pissed off, I'm sure, about that. Um, Starts on Saturday. We suspend at 6:55 p.m. With more rain, and then don't pick back up again until Sunday at noon, Joe. So we have this huge break again in the action. They finish round three in the afternoon. Round four starts Sunday evening and is again suspended due to darkness. At that point, the leaders had only made it to their second hole. So, yay, Monday golf, but not really the kind of Monday golf that you want because you spent all this time stopping and going, and the day ends, and we're still not finished. And how many holes we have left? And how's this all going to work? So it's all just a little bit confusing. On top of all of that, Joe, the leaderboard was sort of lackluster and lacking big names. And I will say at the very end, we did have a push from Phil Mickelson to maybe get that first U.S. Open. He ends up uh, joining a group that included Ricky Barnes and David Duval at two under, behind Glover. But for the most part, like I said, Mike Weir was in the lead by two over Sweden's Peter Hansen after the first round. Second round, Ricky Barnes had separated himself at the top. Lucas Glover won behind him, followed by Weir, Duval, Hansen, and Azuma Yano. Stop me when you've
I've
recognized.
heard of someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Third round, it's still Barnes, Glover, Duval, Englishman Ross Fisher, um, one of the more generic names you'll ever hear. And Hunter Mahan, Phil Mickelson, Mike Weir right there at T5. And by the time it ends and Lucas Glover pulls away with a birdie on the 16th and pars out to win by two over, again, Barnes, Duval, and Mickelson, Ross Fisher, Soren Hansen, Hunter Mahan. Hey, Tiger Woods, welcome to the party. He finished T6 at even par. So it doesn't really do it for me in terms of, the cachet of the major and given all the weather stuff. It was like, man, that was just a slog. And at the end of it, we come out with Lucas Glover. Congrats to him, but okay. And in looking back, I didn't remember a few things. I'd forgotten that Lucas Glover was a Nike guy. So, like, in the prime Tiger years, you also had Glover winning for Nike and wearing the clothes and using the clubs, too. I also forgot he doesn't wear gloves. And this has come up, now and again when he's in contention somewhere. He said in interviews that he just can't feel the club if he's wearing a glove. And the quote he uses that he's a solid 10 handicap with a glove on. So Glover is no glove. It's the easiest like partnership thing in the world. And you can't capitalize on it because you're not the same player. So that's an unfortunate circumstance for him.
Yeah, Al, I'm with you on the 2009 event for somewhat similar reasons as you expressed. And then others of my own. I had a little bit of a revisionist aspect to this when I was fortunate to be paired with Lucas Glover in a pro-am in 2015 and liked him so much. I mean, really easy dialogue, good deep voice with a little southern to it. I just enjoyed his company so much. And so, okay, I'm happy you did win a major championship. We had such high expectations for that tournament because 2002, which is not getting a lot of talk during our discussion today, was a pretty significant U.S. Open in its own right. The People's Open at the ultimate public course, Bethpage, the black, the fearsome, famous black course. And oh my goodness, did it torture and terrorize competitors in 2002. And so it's understandable that you had Tiger Woods winning and Phil Mickelson and Sergio Garcia in the hunt. But it was a setup that was just too hard. They had holes in 2002 that a third of the field couldn't even reach the fairway with a reasonable drive. It was just too much as far as a setup goes. But the right guy won that one, Tiger Woods. Um, and so we went to 2009 and like, oh yeah, another People's Open and let's just see how the big names cope with a really, really tough course. And yeah, if you could say a tournament was anticlimactic after every round, it would be the 2009 US Open. And I think one of the reasons it registers, another reason it registers as a least favorite candidate for 21st century US Opens is because it's so hard to remember watching it. Now, I wasn't there that year. I'd be curious to hear from folks that were, but for watching it on television, and I was deep into covering golf tournaments in those days. Um, it just, again, there was so much stop and start for such long periods of time that you just went and did something else. You just had to get some things done in your own life. And like, oh yeah, they're actually showing some more US Open for another hour and a half late into the evening. Um, you had Ricky Barnes, who was a former amateur champ and a University of Arizona man. But who? Yeah, Ricky Barnes. And then, went crazy 67, 65 the first two rounds, and then a 70 in the third round. He was still leading. And then, like, completely disappeared on the front nine of the fourth round, which nobody saw because it was on Monday. And many people who were interested in the US Open had to work that day
Hmm.
when the whole day was unfolding, not just a few holes that had carried over from the day before, but almost an entire round. So for David Duval, who had come out of nowhere, was tied or second in best in the world 8 years before, out of nowhere with a great tournament. Still a weird story, and the whole tournament was just a downer. But yeah, as you acknowledged at the onset, hats off to Lucas Glover, a guy I like and have been happy to see him do so well over these last few years, but a very forgettable U.S. Open.
Just reading him back, this just reading was exhausting of the whole entire uh, events that took place. So I can't imagine, you know, at the time what that felt like. My 1B there as in terms of another least favorite. And you have to understand, Joe, I'm going into my senior year of high school, freshman year of college, so I've got other things to worry about at this time. But 2010 at Pebble Beach, um, yeah, at that time I'm just like a Tiger super fan. So uh, Pebble Beach, I mean, it's amazing that it's going back there. But then Tiger and Phil both just put up stinkers in the first round, and immediately just like, ah, what are we doing here? The leaderboard kind of wasn't the best either. Um, but then, hey, Tiger and Phil both get back into contention going into the final round, and then again, stinkers on Sunday. So um, that was sort of anticlimactic. Graham McDowell wins that one. Um, and for anyone who's a Tiger fan, it's like you could have gotten that again, Tiger at Pebble. You figured he was going to be the guy, but no, that was not the case. So this was a hard of the three categories we have here: favorite, least, and bizarre. That this was the hardest to pick least favorite for sure.
Yeah, I think 15 years after the fact, a lot of casual golf fans, even moderate golf fans, might forget how good Graham McDowell was for a period of a few years. He just had a knack for holding putts and kind of an interesting shortish swing that was very reliable for a few years. So pretty famous performance at the Ryder Cup the following year, was in the hunt at the 2012 U.S. Open and others. I mean, he really, really was. I don't know what his world ranking was just prior or after winning that tournament, but a legitimately big name for a few years there. It's just he faded out of sight rather quickly and then, ultimately went to live golf and faded further. But you look back at it now and it was like, you don't even remember that Graham McDowell was one of the great the Northern Irish contingent when we think of those other names from that part of the world. So
Mhm.
I love U.S. Opens at Pebble as I love any tournament at Pebble. Unfortunately, I was called away that week for a very important family wedding. And although I did enjoy my time away and the golf I played during that week, I would have loved to have been at Pebble, but as it turned out, um, maybe not as memorable as many had hoped going into that one.
Yeah. And that was the whole big storyline. I remember Tiger a decade earlier at Pebble Beach. Can he do it again a decade later? Instead, we get Graham McDowell and runner up. I know that you know this, but I don't think anyone would remember this name. Gregory Havre of France was the runner up at Pebble Beach that year. Um, Okie dokie. So, our last category, most bizarre U.S. Open of the 21st century. Um, I won't spend a ton of time here because I feel like my answer is sort of the obvious one, and that's 2020 at Winged Foot that you see here on my shirt. Um, the COVID U.S. Open. It doesn't get more bizarre than that. The lack of fans there, plus on top of it being no fans, all of like the digital activations that we were all seeing going on, and the screens that people were sitting in air quotes, and just not having anybody out there. I was reading a piece where they were talking back to the NBC Sports lead golf producer Tommy Roy, and just talking about how they were going to, you know, program that week on their end. And it's, he's quoted saying, when we do really big golf events, I prefer to have our announcers lay out more often, where they set up a shot but then just lay out. And that's sort of like the school of journalism thing that you hear Nance and Mike Tirico and those guys all talk about, is understanding the moment in some of these scenarios and letting the crowd do the work. So that accentuates the drama when you have the murmur of the crowd and makes the shot much more dramatic. So without fans, it's going to be better play to have our announcers actually talk wall to wall. And just hearing that is kind of, it reminds you of what watching the US Open felt like, when it's just dead silent after some of these shots, where you're normally it would just be an uproar and you're just kind of like, hey, great shot. I guess that was pretty big at the time. It just felt like you were watching like a US amateur or something. But it's, the biggest, the National Open and the US Open. So um, very strange. It turned out to be a good test. And Bryson DeChambeau gets his first major win, wins by 6. He was the only player under par all week. Matthew Wolff had the lead going into the last round. So two up and coming guys, getting their chance at the U.S. Open. It just didn't feel like the drama was totally there, and Bryson won pretty convincingly in the end. And then you have this trophy ceremony for nobody on the grounds. He's talking to his parents via, like we're doing right now, over a Zoom call, basically, and they're congratulating him. It just all was just sort of bizarre, and for obvious reasons, that was my choice. But what do you have in this category uh, for the strangest and most curious U.S. Open you can remember from this century?
Yeah, I actually liked your pick better than my two for this category because I had forgotten about 2020 in that I see Colin Morikawa's PGA shot replayed so many times, and what a great leaderboard that was out in San Francisco. But that's where Dustin Johnson won the Masters. And outside of like the different looking trees that year, yeah, just some slightly different colors and textures, I don't remember anything else about the Masters in 2020.
Mhm.
And the US Open, a little bit the same. I did watch, it was exciting. We had nothing else to do. And the fact that a deserving winner came through in the way he did. And then also that name, Matthew Wolff, who was pretty close to Bryson's equal, not only that tournament, but in the stature of his college career, his amateur career, his pro debut, and the rest of it. Somebody that obviously suffered then physically and mentally within a year or two. I don't even know the full story now, but he went to live, did not do well there. Very interesting names in terms of asterisks, but that I think is the best pick for strangest, weirdest, most bizarre U.S. Open of the 21st century. I had two picks that came in back-to-back years. One was Pinehurst 2014. So much talk about the golf course and how Bill Coore and Ben Crenshaw had taken it back to a look and playability that they had not seen at Pinehurst since the 1940s. It was exciting to be into architecture and history and course maintenance and having the debate between, hey, isn't grass supposed to be lush green? And instead, it was tawny brown, especially at the edges. And the balls were racing into not rough, but little love grass and other small, spiky, like wispy plants and so forth. Um, but what made it such a freak show was the results of the tournament. Martin Keimer, a guy who won the 2010 PGA Championship, played pretty well in 2011, and then absolutely dropped out of sight. Uh, I mean, like, fell out of the world's top 100, whatever was going on with him. And then he resurfaced in 20, late 13, but in 2014, he comes back and wins the Players' Championship in May. Th It was like pretty dramatic fashion too. He had a big lead late, blew it, and still held on to win. Like, Martin Keimer, where you been, man? And 1 month later at Pinehurst, he dominates like Rory did at Congressional in 2011 and like Tiger did at the US Open of 2000. Just kooky. Led by three after one round with a 65. Another 65, leads by six. Uh, Shoots two over par 72 in the third round and still leads by five. I mean, this Pinehurst number two was very challenging. Not many guys under par, but Martin Keimer making it look ridiculous. He had a big name behind him, Ricky Fowler, and then a name with a good story that was not such a big name, Eric Compton. Late in the game, for instance, Eric Compton got within four after 10 holes of the final round. 4 holes later, the lead was back to eight. And ultimately, Keimer shoots 69, wins by eight. You did have Fowler, DJ, Henrik Stenson, some big names on that leaderboard up high, but nobody was anywhere near Martin Keimer. So very weird tournament for that reason alone.
He just boat raced everybody. And um, funny thing about Martin Keimer, um, those three tournaments you mentioned, all the big ones, PGA and the Players, US Open, those are his only three PGA Tour wins of his entire career. Were the PGA at Whistling Straits, the Players, and the US Open at Pinehurst. And he won 9 other times on the European Tour with the two majors mixed in there for a total of 11. But it's fascinating to me that those are the only events that he won.
No question. Al, I had one more choice for strangest, weirdest, and that would be the very next year at Chambers Bay.
Yeah.
And Of course, that was Fox's first year of getting the U.S. Open, and I had played Chambers Bay for the first time 7 years before. Thought it was really cool that they picked this course for the U.S. Open. Um, had some controversial holes, but also some phenomenally unique holes. I loved Chambers Bay, and I loved it for a prime time in the East setting with the Puget Sound and the snow-capped mountains in the background. All of that worked beautifully for me. You had a drivable par four. You had holes that you had to land the ball preferably 20, 30 yards short of the green and take the proper contours. You had the flexibility of the first and the 18th being par four or par five. I mean, it was all interesting, at times groundbreaking stuff. But you also had some players that didn't necessarily warm to that, even though they would have been okay with it if it was the British Open, the Open Championship, with so much emphasis on the ground game. But unfortunately, um, weather conditions previous to the tournament and then setup decisions, maintenance decisions between the USGA, the club, architect Robert Trent Jones Jr. with Bruce Charlton and Jay Blossy had nothing to do with what happened to the greens. The grasses on the greens were infected. Uh, it was supposed to be fescue on the greens and POA, which is pretty normal for West Coast golf courses in California, Oregon, Washington, got into the fescue and it made the greens borderline unputtable, which was just an absolute shame. Now, you did have the best player in the world and the second best player in the world, Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson, going down to the final groups. You had exciting shots down the finish. You had memorable holes next to the Puget Sound and actual trains going down a train track that happened. This should have been, by all rights, one of the best U.S. Opens. Instead, it kind of winds up in the category of great champion, um, but one of the weirder ones. So back-to-back years where the course was too much part of the story, and it in the end just took away from otherwise the results and the performance.
Yeah, certainly the quirkiest that I can think of, just everything going on around it. Um, I would expand upon that, but that's going to be our time for today. Uh, appreciate you, Joe, for bringing up these wonderful and sometimes uh, loathsome memories. But would love to hear what everyone else thinks about how they would rank the U.S. Opens in the same way we did. But for Joe Passoff, I'm Al Lunsford. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, Joe.
See y'all.